Okay, so you've heard it all about ChatGPT, right? How OpenAI is literally changing the world. But here's the part of the story nobody's really talking about. OpenAI is losing billions of dollars. We've been digging into their financials, and honestly, it looks like this whole AI boom might be one of the biggest, wildest gambles in the history of tech. So what is really going on behind the curtain at the most famous AI company on the planet? Let's break it down.
First up, let's talk about the numbers that have everyone so excited. OpenAI's revenue growth, well, it's been nothing short of explosive. Seriously. They reportedly skyrocketed from around $2 billion in annual recurring revenue in 2023 to a projected $20 billion by late 2025. That's a tenfold increase in just a couple of years. It's the kind of insane growth that signals a whole new era in technology. But that's only half the story.
And here's the kicker. Even with all that incredible revenue pouring in, they are losing a staggering amount of money. In 2014 alone, they posted a loss of about $5 billion. Now, just to put that into perspective, that's more money than the entire annual GDP of some small countries. Gone in a single year. And that right there is the massive paradox we're digging into today.
So this brings us right to the heart of the problem, this huge revenue paradox. How on earth can a company with this kind of meteoric rise, with a product that everybody knows, be burning through cash at such a scary rate? To get it, you really have to look at the math.
Just check out these raw numbers for 2024. They brought in $3.7 billion in revenue and lost around $5 billion. They were spending almost $1.50 for every single dollar they earned. I mean, that's a burn rate that would absolutely bankrupt almost any other company on the planet.
So where is all that money going? Well, the answer is pretty simple, and it is overwhelmingly expensive. It's the raw power needed to actually run these AI models. We're talking about the cost of compute, these massive data center leases, and electricity bills that could probably power small cities. The cost of just keeping these models running on a global scale is just brutal.
And listen, this isn't just some short-term problem. It's a long-term commitment. OpenAI has already signed deals committing them to roughly $1.4 trillion in future compute power. Yeah, you heard that right, trillion with a T. This isn't just aggressive growth. This is a bet the entire farm strategy on a scale we've never seen before.
Okay, so how does a company possibly stay afloat while it's burning through billions and committing to trillions more? Well, they do it by raising absolutely colossal amounts of money from investors who are convinced this AI revolution is worth the incredible risk. Let's follow the money.
The investment timeline is just mind-blowing. Microsoft was an early believer, right? They started with $1 billion back in 2019, then upped it to $10 billion in 2023. Then SoftBank jumped in, leading these huge rounds. And it all just peaked in February 2026 with a historic $110 billion funding round from a whole syndicate of tech giants, all just to lock down the GPU capacity they need for future models. You know, this quote just captures the feeling perfectly. It really is a high-stakes bet on a company that's losing billions in a market where, frankly, nobody is 100% sure how profitable AI will actually be. The entire tech industry is just holding its breath to see if this colossal bet is going to pay off.
But wait, the financial gamble isn't the only wild part of this story. There's another layer of complexity here, and that's OpenAI's very, very unusual corporate structure and its history of internal drama, which makes this whole high-stakes game even crazier.
See, OpenAI isn't your typical tech company. It's what they call a capped profit hybrid. What that means is the for-profit side, the one making all the deals, is actually controlled by a nonprofit parent. And get this, returns for investors are legally capped at 100 times their initial investment. Anything beyond that is supposed to go back to the nonprofit's mission. Now, it's a noble idea for sure, but it creates some real friction when you're trying to justify valuations in the tens of billions.
And that friction, it's had some very real-world consequences. Remember that whole chaotic weekend in November 2023 when the board suddenly fired CEO Sam Altman? That whole mess came down to these governance issues. It raised serious questions about leadership stability at what's arguably one of the most influential companies in the world right now, and it really put a spotlight on the instability baked into their model.
Okay, so when you combine the massive losses, the frantic funding, and this super weird governance, you're left with this central question of this entire explainer. Is OpenAI actually pioneering the future, or are we all just watching a giant AI bubble inflate in real time? This whole debate has really split people into two very distinct camps. On one side, you've got the defenders who say, hey, this is just like Amazon in its early money-losing years. They point to the record user growth and the fact that it's backed by the biggest names in tech. But on the other side, you have the critics, who are just screaming that this is the dot-com bubble all over again, and it's being fueled by an insane burn rate and way more hype than actual reality.
So let's really look at the critics' case for a second. You've got heavyweight analysts sounding the alarm. HSBC, for example, notes that their infrastructure costs are actually growing even faster than their revenue. An MIT study found that the real-world productivity gains from AI have been kind of disappointing compared to all the hype. And you have legendary investors publicly warning about these unsustainable burn rates, not to mention all the internal concerns about safety getting pushed aside in the race to be first.
But OpenAI has a pretty compelling defense. They can point to genuinely impressive user adoption. I mean, hundreds of millions of users, faster than almost any product in history, with about 10 million of them being paying subscribers. They argue that they're playing the long game, building the fundamental infrastructure for what could be a multi-trillion-dollar industry, just like Amazon did. And they'll stress that their investors aren't just emotional gamblers. They are some of the most sophisticated tech giants on the planet who know exactly what they're getting into.
So where does all this leave us? I mean, given the huge stakes and all this conflicting evidence, it feels like the road ahead splits into three possible futures.
Let's just walk through them. First, the best-case scenario. The dream comes true. The AI revolution is everything we hoped it would be. OpenAI figures out how to monetize it all, and those early investors are rewarded with a historic fortune. Then there's the middle ground. They become a solid, profitable company, but maybe not the world-changing giant everyone hoped for. Valuations would come crashing back down to a more reasonable level. And then there's the worst case. The bubble pops. Funding dries up, and we enter a tech winter that could make the dot-com crash look like a mild cold.
At the end of the day, here's what you need to remember. Two things can be true at the same time. OpenAI is, without a doubt, pioneering genuinely impressive, useful technology. That part is undeniable. But it's also true that they are making one of the biggest, riskiest financial gambles we have ever seen in the tech industry. For now, the hype is still miles ahead of the economic reality.
And so we're left with this one huge question. Is OpenAI building the future, or are they just inflating history's biggest tech bubble? The user growth is real, the technology is real, but so are the trillion-dollar bets and the billions in annual losses. The outcome is